All right. Assuming everyone can hear me, I want to welcome everyone to this edition of the FPSA webinar series. This one is entitled, in case you're wondering if you're in the right spot, um, Practical Hygienic Design in Action, introducing Project Wingman. Also talking about deploying hygienic design tools in practice, right? So that's what we're going to be talking about today. We're going to be really digging into hygienic design tools that are available, and kind of what we're trying to do as the food safety network to, build something that is practical and useful for membership. But before we get into all of that, let's get to know our panelists. And what I'll do is I will introduce myself. I will then pass it on to Nghia, and then finally Eric. And so for those of you attending, thank you again. My name is Brian Shoop. I am the Vice President of Process Engineering for Gray AES. We are a professional services company specializing in architecture, engineering, automation, supporting our parent company, which is construction. We do a lot of work in the food and beverage industry. As a result, myself and many of our team members, most of our team members are kind of steeped in hygienic design day to day. A lot of us are relying on the CFS training as a kickoff to understanding hygienic design. But yeah, I've been in food and beverage industry for several years, and I lead a great team. So that's me. Next, Nghia, if you want to go and introduce yourself.
Sure. Good morning, everyone. My name is Nghia Tran. I'm the Senior Director of Project Development for Ryan Companies. We are a developer, design builder, and process equipment installer for food and beverage. So we are specialized in facilities as well as integrating the process engineering and process design into our projects. I've been in the food and beverage space as design manager, contractors for over 20 years. So I come from the owner side for various different large food manufacturing company, as well as on the contractor side. So and as well as being on the operator on the floor. So I bring different perspective to our project team as well as to the team for at large when we do a project. I'm excited to be part of this discussion. Thank you.
Thank you, Nghia. And last but not least, Mr. Eric. Who are you and what do you
Hi,
do?
Eric Schweitzer here. I'm the Director of Standards and Certification at 3A Sanitary Standards Incorporated. We have been writing standards for over 100 years. 3A incorporated in 2003 and advanced to a third-party verification program where I oversee 16 certified conformance evaluators that travel globally to inspect. I'll also use the word verify that the equipment is in conformance to the 3A standards that we write. These standards are process equipment scoped in a variety of different individual equipment standards, and we also have system accepted practices. We offer a 3A symbol license or a RP or replacement part mark to those equipment manufacturers that have completed a third-party verification by one of the 16 evaluators, as I mentioned. And I'm just thrilled to be with you gentlemen because FPSA is one of our member organizations who supports 3A, one of the founding member organizations. And it's a beautiful day. What can I say? It's great, and
Right.
looking forward to talk.
Beautiful day to be talking about hygienic design. That's right. I'm glad you reminded us, Eric. Right. So FPSA is a member organization of 3A, right? And I think in the past, like just to be, just for everyone's information, like that has been known. But since I've been kind of helming the FPSA food safety network, we've been kind of figuring out how to work with 3A better, right? And so I think like Project Wingman's been an opportunity for us to really align on a project, and I'm excited to kind of share that. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let's start first with, um, some general, kind of overall general discussion around hygienic design and why it matters, right? So, and gentlemen, feel free to dive in. And I do also want to remind folks that if you have a question, you can use the chat. There is a Q&A function, but it may not be monitored as heavily or um, as closely as the chat. So if you have a question, pop it in and we will, we're happy to take questions in the middle of this. We want this to be conversational. But again, on this topic, right? So why does hygienic design matter, right? So, what is it that, what does it even mean, first of all? Like, I guess I would throw it to you guys. You guys have a good definition for what hygienic design is, or do you guys want to talk about, like, what it means to you when we talk about this as a subject? Anyone want to take that one?
Sure, I'll take a stab at it, right?
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
I mean, in the previous seminar, we talked about, sanitation and the requirement and really the protection of the brand and the safety to the consumer. So obvious hygienic design matters because, on the backside, you're doing quality control. This one, you're doing quality assurance. So you are assuring that the equipment, the process equipment, and the entire process assure that you have hygienic product, that is safe for the consumer, incorporated in the OEM, in the design, in the process design, in the layout of the equipment, in how do you plan on doing sanitation. So really the whole when you look at the process of food manufacturing, hygienic design is very, very critical, as well as also just there's a safety aspect for personnel safety. We'll address that at one point as well too. But so as a whole, hygienic design ensure that you do make a quality product and that you eliminate any chance of food contamination for the consumer as well as the brand.
Very well said. Erica, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, great points. Great points, what Nghia said. And hygienic design, you just hit our buzzword. That's we live and breathe this. What is it? It's all about your cleaning method, I think, and what is your application, and how do you deal with the cleaning, sanitizing, sterilization of the equipment following the use? Is the equipment clean in place? Is it clean out of place? Is it both? And what steps do you need to take to ensure you're up and running again to get to the next batch so there's not cross contamination? Because that's a serious concern everywhere. And you're going from one batch to the next. Sometimes you're running simultaneous process lines. So you're using valving technology that's doing separation, and it's critical. So hygienic design, critical. That's where we live. That's our domain.
That's right. And I think what I want to add too is, like, from an engineering perspective, right? And we talk a lot of times about problems you can solve versus problems you can manage, right? And so when you're on the front end of a project, especially, and this is where I think the lens through which the different members of the FPSA look at hygienic design is interesting to me, because we have folks on the OEM side, we have folks on the integrator side, we have folks providing ingredients and disposables. We've got folks like Eric who are kind of on the regulatory side. So everyone's got their own view of this, but at the end of the day, like, good hygienic design practice can help eliminate or solve many problems that are present if it's not paid attention to on the front end, right? So, with enough time and enough people, you can clean a lot of things that aren't hygienically designed, but it is risky and it is time consuming. So a lot of times there's an economic benefit in looking at hygienic design as well. But we'll kind of get into that a little bit more. I think the next point I kind of want to get into is, yes, we've talked about this as kind of a whole concept, and I'm leading a bit, right? But how is it used in practice? What tools are available? And maybe, like, what are the gaps that you all see, right? So, and with the gap discussion as well as tools, like, maybe we introduce a few of the players who sort of have, guidance on this out in the market. I don't know if anyone wants to take that first, so I can keep talking.
No, it's good. It's a great question. Just right off the bat, we definitely put out certificates online that you can get to a database that's live, and you can look up those models and identify whether those are CIP, clean in place, COP, clean out of place, or again, or both. And there's further drips down into some other joint standards that we have with NSF, where you're looking into the hygienic zoning for that standard.
Hmm.
So I just say the database is a great tool to use, and I know we'll get to our tool that we're developing as well.
Yeah.
But just off the top.
Well, and so Nia, I want to give you a chance to respond as well. I think where I started, kind of when with what I would call formal, like rigorous hygienic design understanding, was with kind of the AMI, North American Meat Institute tools, particularly kind of the equipment checklist, right? And many of the folks on here may be familiar with that. I know that, folks in my company are, and that was the first exposure to like some kind of framework that said, here's a guide as to what you're looking for. And, if you kind of you follow all of these guidelines, there's a pretty good chance you're going to have a hygienically designed piece of equipment. And there's also a companion, or I guess an additional checklist that contends more with facility design, which I don't think we need to forget about either, right? Like many of us are in the equipment world, we're dealing with the process itself. But, my colleagues at Gray who deal in architecture and building facility design have their own set of hygienic design principles they adhere to. But Nia, I don't know if you have anything to add there as far as either your experience with any of these tools or maybe what are the shortcomings. I think Eric may have already hinted to a little bit of one of the shortcomings that I want to really pin down, which is to say that there's more than one.
Sure.
But Nia, what do you think?
Yeah, no, just real quick, there's a comment in the chat, as manufacturers, sometimes they're still trying to introduce a clean way to install.
Yeah.
I think that's a great point. So, with all the tools that we have and the standards out there, right? So I think, we did kind of touch base a little bit. Why does it matter? I think with the tool and the checklist and the standards that we have out there, a lot of time when we do the whole project, I think that's what's kind of unique about when you do the whole integrated project where you design the building, the process. It's important for us to have a design or an alignment with all the stakeholders. Once you come to the table on the project, right? All the negotiations are being done. So I think that's the mindset that project teams got to have. Hey, we're already done talking about contract money and all of that stuff. So now let's look at what's important. So we need to agree on the hygienic design principle and what are we gonna design to, and an alignment on how we're gonna approach it. Not that we pick and choose, but we need to say we have EHED standards or do we have AMI standards, whatever. As the owner. And also having been on the operator side, it's like a lot of times the equipment get installed and then we struggle with trying to, figure out how do we do sanitation, how do we clean it? And then you go through all of that. So if we can align up front to a standard and agree, and then I think that makes everyone's job a little easier. And I think that's really the whole discussion that we have here. We have the alignment or the perspective, right, from us. And one of I guess the gap that I often hear, because I work in a lot of different industry, is most owners are very, very good at what they do. That, they know their business, they stay in the business, but often, when you talk to an engineering manager or project manager, they've been at that company for 20 years, 30 years, whatever. They know their best practices. So I think that's where, bringing a fresh perspective. We always say, hey, this is what we've experienced. This is what we've seen on other projects. Would you consider this? And then I think when we share that discussion, I think, or that perspective with the owner, I think we bring value to the owner from the industry that, that kind of help them understand, hey, what are the best practices? Get them outside of their wall to also see, what's available.
Yep. Good. Very good points. And I want to pivot for a minute to some of the, I guess that question that was in the chat, right? And David, thank you for asking, right? So I guess a couple of things. introducing a cleaner way to install, that could mean a couple different things depending what you mean. So like, and I think this speaks exactly to what we're trying to accomplish, right? Because there's guidance in this form of a standard or in form of a checklist on, what an installed like final in place piece of equipment should look like in terms of fasteners, access, penetrating hollow members, utility runs. But if you're asking around, like if you're saying, okay, great, this is helpful, but like show me what example is. Like what's a good way of applying this? I think that like that is what we're trying to solve for, is that there's folks who say this is very open to interpretation. There seems like there's a lot of right ways to do this, probably several wrong ways. But can you give us, some more information, some examples, or even show us what not to do? Um, kind of tipping my hand here a bit, but that's what we're going to get to. So, as far as your question, David, I find this really curious, right? You mentioned engineering and architect. Why does engineering and architecture use the oldest ideas and not open to change? Um, so I think that
I'll be happy to take that one, Brian.
yeah, take that one, yeah, because I have some thoughts on that too as an engineer, obviously, but it's important that we listen to how the perception is. So
Yeah. So David, that's a great question. As somebody that, we designed the facility around the process equipment. Again, I think this is one where it's important for the project team to have a proper kickoff and alignment on what does the design looks like. What does facility look like? Very often, when you get into a project, everybody's just kind of look at the process line, looking at the product going in, product going out. And the owner may have had OEM and equipment that they've used before. So everybody's just really focused on that rather than just kind of say, okay, let's take a step back and kick it off appropriately and say, hey, this is what we're trying to do. Here's all the different components. Architect, you need to understand what the process is doing. And then we also need to understand, hey, there are the new challenges, there's new lessons learned. One of the things that we are going to address in this hygienic design, and one of the principles is the facility design portion of it. So if you can be patient, David, we'll get there. There's also another comment in the chat, say, hey, without the guidance, you can over design. And I think that is an absolute correct statement. So I think, again, this is what's critical for us as a project team when we come together very, very early in the project. What standard are we going to adhere to? And then this is where we have an open dialogue with the owner, with the OEM, with the integrator, with the process designer, and just have a frank and honest discussion on, what are we trying to achieve? And then that's where all team members really collaborate and say, this is what they have done in the past. This is what they've done in other industry. And this is where you can where value engineering can happen. Or you can say, hey, this is what we learned in the past. We've done this and it didn't work out well. And, and then we end up having to go back and, redesign something, right? Or it may impact the operation because, you put a piece of equipment that's too close to a column or a panel, right? Or something that you just can't do, proper sanitation. And then I think Eric kind of mentioned before, we also need to understand if a piece of equipment is, and the owner's expectation is it CIP or COP? I've heard from a colleague on a recent project where they did a complete installation. And I think a month before startup, the owner said, hey, we're going to do COP. And they kind of go, where's that coming from? That has never been documented in the process. Those are the surprises that really, make it difficult, for everyone. So do you have a conversation or discussion early? I think that's really critical.
Yeah, I really want to drive that point home. Like, I think I can understand, especially that, like, if your experience has been, David and anyone else, like, if your experience has been that, like, the people providing these services to your facility, let's assume you're an end user or you're something, right? are not open to new ideas or open to change, are they the right people for you? But next thing I would say
Mhm.
is it is kind of the nuance here. The tricky part is, and I hopefully maybe you guys disagree, let me know, but like there probably doesn't exist a single piece of equipment that that accurately covers all of these items. Like I'm gesturing right now to the NAMI one I have up on my screen. It is always a balance. It is always a negotiation to a certain extent. Like, Wahid pointed out the point about cost. It is expensive for an end user to make a piece of equipment that is perfectly hygienically designed. So there are trade-offs there, cost versus hygienic design. Are you willing to are you willing to pay extra, have something be CIP-able, or are you willing to pay less and pay more in labor to have someone actually take it apart and clean it? That kind of thing. There's
Right.
also, it could be that the standard doesn't apply or it's not that important, or like, the vector in which contamination happens isn't the same for meat versus poultry versus, packaged goods versus beverage versus whatever. So, it's always tough. And that's why I think the discussion with all the stakeholders is really important. You got to align to budget. You got to align to the customer's internal philosophy and their quality program. We also have to align to like insurance requirements, which can sometimes impact the building envelope and other things. So all these things have to be sorry, I'm just looking at this thing. So yeah, like my point is that the tricky part here is wrestling with all of these different, levers that are being pulled and deciding what the right level of hygienic design is. But that is always going to be the case, even with a perfect tool. I don't think we are intending to solve that problem right now, because it can't be solved. It's something that if you try to solve it, you're going to end up alienating a lot of people. Instead of what I think we want to do and what we're trying to do, as you'll see, is getting to the point where we have more information, more examples, more of a dialogue around, hey, like, this is applicable to meat and poultry, but not as applicable to dairy. You might want to look at this instead, reference a different standard, to make it easier to navigate like what it really might take to achieve a certain standard and even have some idea, some way to quickly sort of put a dollar to it, right? If I have two
Right.
different details depicting, a leg attachment to a floor in a ready to eat area, I'm going to have two different details. One's better, cleaner, but it costs twice as much. You've got them both in front of you. That's something you can quickly look at, understand what it is, compare to existing. Does the owner like it? Do we agree this is the right thing, etc.? So I do want to make sure we keep moving, but this is a good discussion. So kind of get to the can keep kind of honing in on our main point here, right? Talking about the checklists and tools. It sounds like in my experience in the past has been that we're very lucky if we go into a project with an owner. This is just from my experience. We're lucky if we go into a project with an owner and the owner has a checklist or a hard spec on what they expect to see from um, from a standards perspective, whether it's like referencing AMI, referencing 3A. Sometimes they do, sometimes they don't. But I think getting these tools into adopting them on projects, whether you're an end user, whether you're an engineer designing the thing or whatever, is important. So I guess I'll ask the question: How do we make sure that the tools that are already out there and that people will spend a lot of time building and a lot of time developing? What have you guys seen as far as like adoption in the field or in real life? And Eric, I'm really curious to see what you think from the
Sure.
3A perspective as well. And then like what can we maybe change about that? Like what are some things that we need to go after if we're going to see this really take off more than it has,
Right.
if there is a gap. Yeah. So Eric, I'm curious
Sure.
to see maybe you can start. Yeah.
Sure. Thanks, Brian. I mean, just I think we keep coming back to the value added. It's, we're all, nobody's working in a vacuum here. We need incentives. Those incentives are, energy efficiency. You don't want cost overruns. As we discussed, you don't want to over design. You don't want to also under budget. But
Hmm.
when you're out there in the field, the adoption, we're seeing, back to the question of over design is, I could raise a couple of points where that's a good thing, where there isn't a one size fits all piece of equipment, but I can think of components I can think of pumps. I can think of, meters. You're moving a slurry of, let's say, sauce versus you're moving a slurry of, UHF or, special self-stabilized product. You're going to be reaching for a higher hygienic design, but now you have the versatility to bounce into, say, moving a slurry of, say, peanuts or, anything that's transportable liquid form. Really, you're dealing with CIP technology. So I think part of the being out in the field is educating the user to say, this is, installing it, this equipment, using this equipment in such a way is going to give you easily cleanable, there's less time involved with the cleaning we discussed. Um, and just the point on the old technology, standards are certainly 3A. I know EHEADS, we're not there um, to prevent new technologies. We do need to support the old technologies, though, however. So, the technology that started 100 years ago, they're still in play today. They're definitely improved, because we've moved the needle a little bit. And you can, with this checklist we're going to get into, you can kind of select the order of hygienic value, or the amount of precision that you need, or the surface texture. How much are you concerned about cross contamination, or pathogen harborage points, and pore welds? Do you have product that's continuously sitting in a tank? It's the tank walls are, for example, they're always wetted. So, what kind of level well do you want? So those kind of discussions. And I think part of this project, we definitely are inviting collaboration. We need experiential data points and understanding where the challenges are. So we definitely don't want to overfocus, because we know moving that needle for legacy designs, harvesting equipment, what have you, is a very difficult thing. But especially speaking for the dairy industry, we've done a great job with it, and you can see those the additions that have gone through. So it's anyways, we need more collaboration is the end answer, but that would help with the adoption process.
Yeah, anything to add from your perspective and your experience?
Yeah, I think one of the things that you touch on, Brian, is it's and let's face it, all engineering managers working for corporations, large corporations, they are taxed. They are just, utilized to the max. So a lot of time when we start a project, it is very rare that you have a team that can hand you, this is our standard, this is our best practice, right? And having been in the industry and having been on the owner side, people do change job, and people do change industry. So what they bring with them is their knowledge from the past project and the past, previous company they work for. At best, sometimes those get adopted to the new environment, a new company they work with. And so there's some of that. But because they are a corporate overhead, if you will, right? And a lot of time they don't have the luxury to really develop their standard. I've been involved in developing, a couple of standards, but because those companies did make the investment and because they want to standardize it. But again, it's rare. So you may see that. So I think one of the things that the challenge for us from the industry side is, there's a lot of different standards out there, a lot of different information out there.
Yeah.
How does the owner have, changing jobs from different industries or different companies, how do they vet it? Because they just don't have the time. So I think that's where this platform, that's where this group, we can collaborate, we can offer our experience, our lessons learned, if you will, right? And we can vet it out, because there's a lot of information on the internet, but who knows, how it's vetted. And so I think it's important when you are looking for information, that you can be confident that, hey, it's been been vetted, and there's some truth to it rather than just information put out there and misused, if you will, or without explanation, and you don't use it correctly. That can also bring some harm. One of the comment I think was, hey, how do we prevent from over design? And I think one of the things that as from the owner side, you always have to be careful. The little cost savings that you may save on a design element or design approach or principle into a piece of equipment or an installation or a line layout. How does that impact the operation efficiency? How does that impact food safety? How does that impact, your sanitation and your QA process? You have to do the business case analysis. And I think that's where we as service providers need to bring that to the owner, when we sit across the table. And if you have the OEM and the integrator and the process installer, we can all collaborate and say, okay, this is an approach to the design of the equipment. This is the basic, QA requirement. And here are the trade-off. If we do this little additional feature, to ensure that it is hygienically designed and is convenient for, sanitation, that little added cost over the lifetime of the piece of equipment, over the product manufacturing cycle, if you do the math, it really pays itself. And it's hard for the owner sometimes to understand that. But that's where I think if we share that and have that frank discussion with them up front. And this is where, if we all sit at the table, we can offer what we think is let's say a magnitude of cost, and in some cases it may not be an added cost if you design it early, if you incorporate it into it. I think that's really where this platform and this collaboration kind of come in.
Yeah. So I kind of want to take, David made some additional comments in the chat, and I want to use that to kind of transition to our discussion about what is Project Wingman and what are we doing. Because, the comment is we've had contractor installing hygienic product, not in the most sanitary fashion because the engineering was incomplete, as the bill of materials does not include the installation instructions. Okay. So putting aside the fact that there are some installing contractors that are more familiar with hygienic design than others, the best bet is always to have something, a design or a specification that says, this is how we want it done. If that doesn't exist, if your company is like, we don't have that, or we haven't aligned on that, what do you have available to you? You've got some industry standards. Let's say, okay, it's a meat plant. I'm going to go use the AMI checklist, give that to them and say, I expect this to be followed, or I need you to comment on this before you come in or understand it. But you'll notice there isn't a section in here around how to install something, or there especially isn't an instruction in here or a spec around how do you do this? How do you achieve this when you're installing a piece of equipment right next to a running line, and you've got to put up a curtain, you've got to take care of it. Like, there's all these different things that in practice, I think, really make it hard if you're not really well versed in this stuff, and you don't have a lot of experience with it. It makes it really hard to apply this either to a package I'm sending out to a vendor, or a design, or me myself understanding what I need to audit as a plant engineer. So anyway, the genesis of Project Wingman, the reason why it's called Project Wingman is because it's meant to be sort of your buddy, your sidekick, our vision for this is to be a companion guide to, we're starting kind of with the AMI checklist, but ultimately like a centralized sort of compilation document that talks about how they interact with each other, other principles that are shared across all different markets within food and beverage. Like hygienic design, when it comes to materials of construction, the rules are very straightforward, and here they are. There's nothing in here that says product contact surfaces shall be made with, materials that are compatible and cleanable and this and that. But beside from some mention of stainless steel, it doesn't talk about surface finish a little bit. It doesn't talk about like how to apply an RA specification for surface roughness to, like what I'll call fabrication terminology, or like what's the actual mill finish or the polish, whatever.
Yeah.
So like there's a lot of things that I think we can do. That information's out there. What we want to do with Project Wingman is gather that together and put it into a place where it's like if you're a plant engineer, you're working in a shop making equipment, you're an integrator, it's all there, and it gives you, if nothing else, it gives you some good real world examples of everything to say, hey, like maybe this isn't perfect, but this is a good go by, either for pricing or for conceptual design, whether it's details around specific finishes, details around fastening, details around, piping. It can be anything, but we all know that there's all these examples. And within the FPSA, and especially within the food safety network, we've got a ton of professionals in these different markets I mentioned earlier. So why not leverage the experience we all have, as well as leverage the real world examples of problems that this group and others have, and build that into something that responds to the problems and leverages that knowledge. And that's going to take the form of a document of some type that will, run through. And the goal was for this to be sort of an evergreen effort, right? Because knowledge changes, new people join the organization and have something to say around a typical topic. But as we'll sort of get to, I think if nothing else, we want to explain what this effort is about and encourage some of you all, if you're willing and able, to participate in it with us, because the three of us, are not able to do this on our own, and I don't think you want us doing it on our own, right? The purpose of this is to get that broad view of what's out there in the industry, what are some best practices. I think the best practices is a good way to look at this, and that a lot of that comes from you all. So again, let me back up. So, Eric, I don't know. Like, I know you've put a lot of time into this as well, and so has Nghia. But like, with what we have started so far, I don't know if you want to talk about like where we started and kind of where we're at. Maybe give the example of like the materials of construction. I think it's a really good, powerful example. Would you mind kind of?
Yeah. Can I just? Yeah, absolutely. There's a perfect trail into this discussion because the gentleman was commenting on dealing with installation issues, and I'm not trying to toot my own horn, but I guess I will a little. But 3A requires suggested installation and cleaning procedures from the manufacturer to be as part of the 3A specs. But I just wanted to say, sometimes actually the fabricator doesn't know the end use. All right, it's on the shelf, it's on a website, the order comes in, they send it. There needs to be some of that dialogue between, especially in this industry. This is, I think, key. I think this is the part that's missing to the point of this project. We need that collaborative environment. We need to hear the installation difficulties, and the other stakeholder groups need to hear, how it's performed here and there, and maybe we can improve it. But just as you laid out with the checklist we're developing, there's so much commonality. So we can find all those base points, and then we can highlight, the superfluous, or the over extra maybe design that you want to add in there if you start getting to like pharmaceutical processing, because 3A does have a standard, at least for our product side, but as you mentioned, AMI is, I think, smooth, and so maybe we can move that needle too here. But
yeah. So again, like, so looking at principle one, and I don't know if I even know if I can share my screen. Probably not, but that's okay. So, so again, if you look at the principle one, first principle of the 10 for AMI, made of compatible materials, and there's different sub bullets that are literally a checklist. Does it meet or not meet this standard if you're evaluating a piece of equipment? Well, let me give you a good example. So 1.3 says plastics and composites shall remain intact without degradation or changes in shape, structure, or function to standard operating sanitation and storage protocols. That's saying a lot, not giving a lot of detail. What plastics are typical? What composites are typical? Is there a class of material that is typically referred to as meeting this requirement? And what are the considerations for selecting that? If there's 2 or 3 different plastics, for instance, that are ubiquitous throughout the industry, what determines if you're picking plastic 1, 2, or 3? Is it cost? Is it, some kind of corrosion inhibition? Is it, is it the material itself? Is it availability? Either way, like providing that context and saying, yeah, these are, when used correctly, these are the appropriate plastics to use. That's an example of something we can do here. And coming back to the point that Eric made, and I think to David's question is like, we want to hear what problems you guys have encountered. Like David, if you've got a bad experience with installing equipment, that is certainly something that we would be open to listening to and hearing about, and maybe even, you know, actively and intentionally responding to that throughout the course of Project Wingman. Let's say, oh, maybe, for instance, we think that we need to create a section that talks about, you know, installation specifically. You know, if you're saying there needs to be an installation plan, are there good best practices for what that looks like? Maybe either some templates and examples. I think there's a lot of power to that. And again, like some of this stuff, and I'm thinking from my own experience, right? I'm sure that certain companies feel very they're very protective of some of their designs, right? So it's like, you know, we have what we think is the ideal, you know, design for you know, a sanitary transition between rooms. Like we have a curb detail that is just gorgeous, and we don't want to share it because it's a competitive advantage. But the idea is here to kind of take off our company hats and say, what's the right thing to do for the industry? And, you know, it's the idea of rising tide lifts all boats. We want to make hygienic design more accessible and I guess, you know, more rigorously applied throughout the industry. And I think that, you know, the idea here is not to compete or not to, you know, give away trade secrets, but rather we're smart people. We care about the industry. We care about protecting consumers. So how do we do that? And this is the path we've chosen to try to contribute to the conversation, right? So hopefully that makes sense. And I think you know, Nghia, what I'd like to talk about maybe a little bit more about that collaboration. You touched on in the past about stakeholders, right? Like maybe talk a little bit more around, you know, what stakeholders are typically, you know, need to be involved. You touched on some of that already, but you know, how is collaboration going to help us get Project Wingman off the ground? And is there an analog between how that is positioned to how a project itself gets executed, you know, in the field, either a small project, a big project, an install, or a full build?
Yeah, well, thank you. Right, I think you touched on something that is kind of important, right? I mean, our goal is really to contribute to the industry and helping, you know, the industry and protecting the consumer. Yes, there are some things that, you know, some company are innovative and they do better, and you do have to protect those secrets, right? Well, those trade advantage, you know, I will say. So, however, I think that it's important for the owner and all the different team members, right, to kind of understand the collaboration that we're looking for from the designer, the installer, the OEM, the supplier, the integrator, and the owner kind of weigh in, because with this team and other members, you know, food and beverage is just so broad. There's so many different industry that different application, you know, we can't be an expert at all, even though, let's say, you know, I've been working in it for 20 some years in you know, in different sectors, but only experience on the project. And then there's people that, you know, seen all different types of applications, you know, that has the knowledge that you know, much greater. And that's the experience that we're looking for to help us collaborate. If you kind of step back and take a look, and the reason why we wanted the collaboration, you know, with all the stakeholders, to that point, how does the owner address let's say a superior design, and there's a cost associated with it, or a less efficient design, but cheaper, right? So if the owner doesn't understand and we can't point to an example or a standard, the owner being, or the project manager, right, being capital sensitive, is going to say, I'm going to choose this one. But it, you know, may not be, it's not a completely you know, bad decision, but it's not as efficient. So I think this is where the collaboration help breach that gap so that we all have kind of a basic understanding, as well as when the owner send it out for, let's say, for pricing, then he set a standard for everybody to kind of bid to, so that we can all say, hey, it is apples to apple, because as we all know, I mean, so many different variation on how you can design a system, install the system, and there's a lot of different ways to control cost, but we just need to understand, the owner needs to understand what that is. And I think that's really where the collaboration and developing this tool or this depository of information that's been vetted out will help. And I think the thing for the panel and for members as they're listening to this later is that we're not claiming to be the expert, of everything. We're basically offering a starting point, and we're looking for collaboration. And this isn't meant to be a fixed document. This is a continuous evolution. So our team, what we're looking at is, there are 12, 10, 11, 12 principles. And we're going to continue to revisit and review this every month, one. And then in a year, we had a chance to review it and update and touch on every one of them. Maybe there's no change, and that's fine. But at least we have prove it to ourselves and provide that value to the member that, hey, we did look at this. And, maybe in a year that has passed, there's not a whole lot of development. Great. And there's something that might just increase it. It's like, hey, there's new materials coming out, there's new supplier, there's new standard, new case study that we can point to why we should do something different. I think that's where the collaboration and the, let's say, the evergreen nature of the document is really helpful.
That's right. That, I think it facilitates collaboration, and we can't be successful without it. I think you said something really interesting, and I look, I understand that people are people, and I understand that, like, in many times in our, like, what looks good on paper, we all nod our heads and agree, yep, this is hygienic design is the right thing to do. There are things that pay for themselves. There are things that are non-negotiables in our mind that you're going to have pushback anyway from a person. And I've seen them before, and this is not, not anyone specific, but like, there are people who've been in that plant for 40 years who have only ever known that plant, know the way that plant's done it. And so we got to, part of it is just, how do we introduce new concepts to these people? They're resistant to change because it's unfamiliar to them. Well, pointing to a sentence on a checklist, is that as powerful as providing a case study, providing a detail, providing a photograph, providing real commentary? I think that this can help with some of those discussions. But at the end of the day, people are people, and we're not going to be able to fix your rhetorical or persuasive skills with this checklist. So that's always going to be a factor. But I do think too, like, just as if we are looking to, well, let me give you an example. So when I first worked in the food industry and first got introduced to, like, the concept of hygienic design, it quickly became apparent that, like, my specific plant had a certain way they interpreted that and a certain way they wanted it done. So, like, there's the AMI standard, then there's, like, our plant's standard. And if I'd stayed there, or if I was still there, that's the only thing I would know, unless I was really curious and out there seeing things. But point being, like, when I've gotten onto the side I'm on now, where we are serving multiple customers across many different verticals within food and bev, you realize there is a lot of different ways to do something right, and there's a lot of ways to do something wrong. And so, just like that breadth of exposure has helped me understand hygienic design, we want to kind of package that up and give everyone else the benefit, for those who maybe, hey, I like my company. My company is sort of narrowly focused on this one thing. I don't want to have to leave to go to another job to get this exposure. Instead, here's this sort of compilation of all this different information. So maybe we beat that to death. But before we get to the end of this, I do want to take a second to say, because I've seen some folks comment about interest in participating. At the end of this, you will get a survey, and in that survey, there are going to be some questions. I'll just say them. would you like to contribute to Project Wingman? And if you say yes, it'll ask you, if you'd like to contribute, how would you like to contribute? There's different ways. Do you want to share best practices? Do you want to be part of like the, copy editing and review? There's some people who really, and you could call it a pathology or mental illness, that like reading and writing a lot, which is fine. They're, joining calls and workshops, contributing technical expertise, et cetera, et cetera. And then there's a field to add your email. So if you see this and you're interested, please take advantage of that survey and let us know. But again, if that's not available to you, our contact information is available. Our emails are in the invite. If not, I can put them in the chat. Reach out to us, and we want to get this going. We've met several times. We've developed a framework. We have some examples going. Still very much a work in process, but I think as we've gotten into it more, we're like, we need help, not just in terms of horsepower to create new content, but also we need the knowledge and the expertise. So,
yeah,
I guess I want to make sure like we've kind of covered all the points we wanted to cover. I'd also encourage anyone out there, in the audience who has any questions for us. We've got about 8 minutes left until 12:30 Eastern, at which point I do have a hard stop. But again, now is the time for open discussion, open questions. And I get Eric and Nghia, same thing. Like if there's anything that you want to touch on or any of your unique experience you want to kind of add a little color or flavor to this effort or this discussion, now's the time.
Sure. Now the questions and answers would be great. I'll just briefly say, I think as we progress through the checklist, it'll become apparent that the scope of project defines how you spec the project. So which standards are essential, and through this experiential learning, this collaboration, we can build on that. So we can understand that, look, I just, I have installation problem. Maybe it's a slopage issue. My experiences going through food plants and, milk plants have, they run the gamut. You'll see everything, but it comes better from the industry. I think we all know what our challenges are. So I think if we work together on that, we build something that's really impressive that everyone can use. It'd be very helpful for industry.
Mm-hmm. If I were to, go ahead, Ian, please.
So one thing, I just wanted to just kind of put let's say a caveat out there, right? I mean, what we're developing is a tool. It is not, and even though it is a checklist, but it is, it's just to make sure that, hey, that we have addressed these things, right? It is a starting point for the discussion. I don't want people to think that it is an end all and be all list, because we're just not that smart and know everything, right? And we can't know everything about every specific plant, specific industry, and the specific process. But we wanted to kind of provide a valuable tool that's been vetted, that's been collaborated, with everyone, as much as we can get participation that people can use for the discussion. Kind of going back to my initial comment, right? So we, when you kick off the project, you said, hey, these are the things that we need to address, or we should have a discussion, whether that's a separate work stream to review it, or, how do we incorporate this into the design? So there's not a gap between the engineer designing the system and the installer and the owner's expectation, so that we all have a project document or a project brief that we can kind of all agree on, how do we align on the project and implement it, so that it makes it a successful project. I think that's really, that's what's important.
I think another point, everything you guys have said has been fantastic, and I obviously appreciate your expertise and experience. And kind of as a last call, maybe kind of wrapping up, I don't see a lot of questions coming through, and that's okay. One thing I want to make clear is that we will take as much or as little help as you as a person want to give. So if you're listening to this right now and you're going, man, I think I could probably do this, but I don't want to have to commit. Like, we're not looking for a commitment. If you want to get heavily involved, by all means. But if it's as simple as you saying, hey, you know what? I just had a experience where either saw something I really liked, or saw something I'd never seen before, or saw something I hated, and it was a problem, send an email, snap a picture. Like we probably need to figure out how we're going to, what tool we're going to use to collect information. But that is completely acceptable and helpful. And if that's the level of participation people want to have, that's fine.
Yeah, that would be
So again,
great.
I don't want to scare anyone away or think that, oh, if I sign up for this, I'm going to be signing up for multiple years of monthly review. If you want to do that, you can. But I do see too that like a lot of this, I think, will be facilitated through the FPSA's food safety network. I see that as kind of one of our main missions moving forward is to kind of maintain this. So I would encourage everybody here, if you haven't already, consider signing up for the Food Safety Network, where among other things, we talk about this, we talk about, we typically have members present on, their sort of expertise in kind of a short form tech talk. Hopefully it's value added for you. But if you want to really want to get involved, I would say please consider joining FPSA Food Safety Network as well if you haven't already. And if you are and aren't coming to the meetings, come to the meeting. But yeah, we're excited about this. We have a lot of work ahead of us. I think one of the things we have to decide, right, is breadth or depth. What do we start with? So do we take, 1.1 out of the AMI checklist and beat it to death, where we have every possible example and use that as our guideline for how we construct the rest of the document? Or do we instead try to get an equal amount of what I'll call shallower but still helpful information across the entire breadth of all these different standards, and then work a layer deeper at the next iteration? So that's something we're trying to figure out too, but we want to flow to where it's going to be the most useful to the membership. And the three of us are not the membership. We don't even represent, anything close to a majority. So that's also what we want to hear. Like, what's the highest impact? If we're looking at impact versus effort, we want to find those things that are reasonably low effort but super high impact to start with. So that's another reason why we want to have some participation. So that's really, we want to call this just a kind of a plea for participation in disguise. You could call it that. Hopefully there's been some, you all have gotten something out of this as attendees, but really what we're after is we want to bring you on the journey with us and have you all participate in this with us. And if you know someone in your organization who would be a better fit for this, or someone throughout the FPSA or otherwise, feel free to spread the word. We're going to try to make it as easy as possible to get people engaged in this. The survey is one thing. There's some other tools that are going to be launching soon that may make it a lot easier for us to collaborate, as a group on this topic or whatever. So with that, I think we are lining up close out. So I just want to thank Eric and Nghia. Thank you guys for sharing your valuable perspectives, right? And for everyone out there for joining the discussion today. We will have a recording available. We continue all to keep thinking about this, continue the discussion, participate in the Food Safety Network. And tell us your focus area. Tell us what you want to, where you think you can contribute in this survey. We really encourage you to do it. And we do have an upcoming webinar next Thursday, the 25th at 11:30. There's going to be a webinar called Building Collaboration Between Suppliers. We'd love to see you out. Thank you very much. Everyone have a great day, and thanks again for coming.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Take care.
Great to
Bye.
collaborate with you guys. Bye now.